Week 11 of the fantasy football season. Here's the top 12 defense DST units I'm ranking this week. Number 1, the Detroit Lions. So the Lions last week, their defense was a main factor for them coming back from 23-7 and beating the Houston Texans. So this defense, they get pressure on the quarterbacks. Darius Smith should make his line debut. And this week, it's a great matchup versus the Jacksonville Jaguars. They can't move the football down the field. Now Mac Jones in there, quarterback. The running game has been non-effective over the last few weeks here, and Christian Kirk's out, and Brian Thomas has been banged up over the last few weeks. So with all those factors, and the Lions most likely will get off to a quick start where they're going to make Jacksonville one-dimensional and start teeing off. I think they go out there, a big game, number 2, Minnesota Vikings. So this Viking DST, for the majority of the season, they've been one of the best units in all pro football. And this week, a good matchup at the Tennessee Titans. Not much going on with their offense. Only Tony Pollard, Calvin Ridley, the only threats on that offense. And the other thing as well is they create turnovers, and they're another team. If they get off to a good start or have a lead, that's when they really tee off. And we saw last week, it was a bad offensive performance for Minnesota's offense, but the defense kept it in it. And once they got the lead, the defense held it, had a couple interceptions, got a few sacks. And this week, it's going to be a tough ball game for Will Levis, who holds onto the football a whole lot, takes a lot of sacks, and throws a lot of interceptions. So that's going to play right into the hands of Minnesota this week. Number 3, the Houston Texans. So this Texan DST last week went out there and they put on a performance, 5 interceptions, but still lost the ball game versus the Detroit Lions. So this week, that Cooper Rush, the quarterback, Dallas Cowboy team. Dak Prescott out for the season. And I think Houston, they're going to go into Dallas on Monday night, get to Cooper Rush early and often, create a few turnovers. And if this Texan offense will a good start, this Cowboy offense we saw last week couldn't move the football, being one-dimensional once they were down a few scores versus the Philadelphia Eagles. So I think that same type of game script could happen for Texans at the Cowboys, where Houston's off to an early start and their defense really goes out there and puts in a good ball game. Number 4, the Denver Broncos. So Denver, one of the best defenses in the league. This week, decent matchup, Atlanta coming to town, where this Atlanta offense is better at the home in Atlanta than they are on the road. And last week versus a mediocre to bad defense, we saw Atlanta's offense not do much at New Orleans. We know Denver's got the best corner in the league, Patrick Surtain. He obviously solves a lot of problems for this Denver Bronco team. And this week versus Kirk Cousins, who's taking a lot of sacks and does still have a fumble issue with this part of his NFL career as a veteran. I think Denver, they're going to create a few turnovers in this game, and they're definitely going to get a few sacks, and they'll hold you in the mid-teens to low 20s. We saw it last week versus a good offense of Kansas City. They held them down for the most part in that game. Number 5, the Green Bay Packers. So the Packers coming off by refreshed, one of the better turnover teams in the league is their DST in the season. And this week, a good matchup at the Chicago Bears, where they just can't move the football or score points, where Chicago last week only scored 3 points versus a pretty mediocre to poor defense of the New England Patriots. I think Green Bay is going to get pressure on Caleb Burley and often. Williams holds on to the football like Will Levis a whole lot. He turns the football over, and it's not college anymore, where his athleticism and arm strength could get him so far. So this week, I think Green Bay, they want to make a statement, and coming off a bad loss and coming off the bye week, getting healthy now, and a division ball game. It wouldn't be surprising to me if the Packers go out there, have a big performance. Number 6, the New York Jets. So the Jets, their DST's definitely been a bust this season, considering they were the second or third defense off the board in most fantasy leagues. But this week, a good matchup versus the Indianapolis Colts versus Joe Flacco, who was with the New York Jets for a few seasons, going back 2-3 years ago. But Flacco, we know he's a turnover machine, and at 39 years old, if you get a hand on him, he's going to go down and take a sack. So since this game's at home for the Jets in MetLife, I'll give them an edge in this one, that they'll play decent defense and obviously better than last week. If this game was Indianapolis, then I think they would have been down more in the rankings this week as New York. But if they could get off to a decent lead and play some good football, I think they have a decent ball game this week is this New York Jet DST. Number 7, the Los Angeles Rams. So this Ram DST last week, I thought, did a decent job versus the Miami Dolphins on Monday night. This week, a good matchup in New England, where their offense doesn't have many threats, only Ramondre Stevenson in the backfield and Hunter Henry at the tight end position. Where at the receiving core, they don't got much going. Demario Douglas, Jalen Polk, Bote, Kendrick Bourne, those guys don't really do much, obviously, for this Patriot team. And they're young receivers and improving. But I thought Drake May, he's been decent so far, but he's a young quarterback taking sacks, turning the football over. And after coming off a loss last week, I think Los Angeles, this defense travels well cross country this week. They can do. and go out there and put in a decent performance. Number 8, the Miami Dolphins. This week, a good matchup versus the Vegas Raiders. Now, Desmond Ridder into the starting lineup as the starting quarterback, where Gardner Minshew just couldn't get anything done. And they shied away from Gardner Minshew early in the season, going with Aiden O'Connell, but he got hurt in a ball game where he's going to be out possibly a few more weeks before he returns to the lineup. Is Aiden O'Connell. So Desmond Ridder last season was a bad year, no doubt about it, for him with the Atlanta Falcons. But maybe he's got a chip on his shoulder and he wants to prove he belongs in the NFL. But this week, I think this Miami Dolphin team goes out there, they create a few turnovers, get a few sacks on Desmond Ridder. But the only thing I'll give credit to with Ridder is he's a mobile quarterback and he uses his legs to get some first downs and make plays. But I think Miami was out there and tees off of Ridder at times and has a decent ball game. Number 9, the New Orleans Saints. So this Saint DST, a middle-of-the-pack team. Last week versus a good offense of the Atlanta Falcons, they held them to 17 points. They created turnovers. They got to Kirk Cousins. And this week, a good matchup versus one of their former quarterbacks, Jameis Winston. I know he was only there for a couple starts as Jameis Winston, but I think they could get pressure on Winston. And we know Winston's a gunslinger, and he's going to turn the football over and take some big hits. But also we know he does put points on the board. But this week, I think it's going to be a ball game where Jameis gets a few turnovers, but will put points on the board. But this New Orleans Saints team, definitely a better team at home, is their defense than it's been on the road throughout the last few seasons. With the coaching change, I think this team was rejuvenated last week, and we'll see if that momentum carries on to this week. Number 10, the San Francisco 49ers. So this DST hasn't been great this season, but Seattle's offense has been hit or miss at times for Seattle. But DK Metcalf most likely returning to this ball game, which obviously is a huge plus for Seattle's offense to go with JSN and Tyler Lockett, Kenneth Walker. But Nick Bosa, I don't think anyone on that offensive line can hold them for Seattle. They got Fred Warner. You got Lenore in the secondary. So they got good pieces in San Francisco. Just got to play better as a unit. And I think this week they could get some pressure on Geno. Because if you turn over, these division games are grinded out type of games. Number 11, the Philadelphia Eagles. So speaking of division games, this is one with the Washington Commanders. And we know this Commander team with Jaden Daniels on the center, it's definitely turned their whole franchise around. And this is a battle for first place in Week 11. Who would have thought so in the NFC East? So Washington, they got a good offense, no doubt about it. But this Philly defense is starting to buckle down over the last few weeks and play good defense, no doubt about it. So this week, Thursday night, I know these games are usually high scoring, but I think Philadelphia still could create some turnovers, make some plays, and get to Daniels a few times in this game. And the 12th and final defense, DST on rankings, the Cleveland Browns. So this Brown unit was good last season. This season, their defense really hasn't stopped anyone. But this week, I think the matchup is an all-right matchup for this Cleveland Brown team, where this New Orleans Saints offense isn't all that great. I know they put 20 points on the board last week, but it was a little fluky in my opinion, where Valdez-Scantling had 2 deep touchdowns on only 3 catches. So this week, I think Cleveland, they could go into New Orleans. They could get some pressure on Derek Carr. And Derek Carr, we know he's prone to taking sacks and turning the football over. So this week, it could be a grinded out type of game. And I think Myles Garrett could make some plays as well and have some impact and put some points on the board for Cleveland. So that's the top 12 defense DST units I'm ranking for Week 11 of the fantasy football season.